I've told you about Peter Green's 1959 Les Paul. I've told you about Peter Frampton's Phoenix rising from the ashes. I've told you about Slash's Les Paul copy and even Dylan's Stratocaster that he used to go electric. But I guarantee you that if you added up all those other guitars, their stories wouldn't amount to the long and winding road that was taken by a 1961 Stratocaster owned by Irish blues guitarist Rory Gallagher. Last month in Forgotten Fretmasters, we looked at the man. Now let's take a look at his absolutely indestructible Strat. Next on If Guitars Could Speak. Hello and welcome to If Guitars Could Speak, the series where we look at iconic pieces of gear, amazing musicians, and interesting stories from rock and roll history. This is episode 21, so when you're done here, make sure you check out the other 20 episodes for any stories you might have missed. Today, as a companion piece to episode 4 of Forgotten Fretmasters, we're going to examine a 1961 Fender Stratocaster that was owned by none other than Irish bluesman Rory Gallagher. The focus of this video will be on the guitar, but to see more on Rory's career, follow the link at the end of this video to the episode of Forgotten Fretmasters. This Axis story has more twists and turns than a roller coaster, so it should be a fun ride. Always remember to drop a like on the video if you think other guitar fans would like to see this, and of course, subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel for much more content just like this. Let's go! Irish legend says that this was the first Stratocaster in Ireland, and who am I to argue with that? What we do know is that this particular Stratocaster, serial number 64351, was ordered by a member of Ireland's Royal Show Band named Jim Conlon. The show band era in Ireland, which ran through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, referred to a circuit of large bands that traveled the whole of the island, playing to packed dance halls and theaters. The bands would play a mixture of genre music, catering to large and varied crowds. They basically existed to provide a good time. Conlon formed the Royal Show Band in 1957, and after a few years of uncertainty and mixed success, they started to take off after 1960. As a result, Conlon thought it was time for a new guitar, so he special ordered a Fender Stratocaster, which was no small feat in those days. But he was disappointed to find that Fender had sent a Sunburst model rather than the Fiesta Red that he had initially wanted. Due to shipping constraints in those days, it would take years for the red model to arrive, so Conlon had to make do with what he had. He would play the guitar in the show band for over a year, patiently waiting for his Fiesta Red model to arrive, and once it did, he would sell the 1961 Sunburst model to Crowley's Music Store in Cork, which is the hometown of none other than the Gallagher brothers. Rory's little brother Donald remembers the day that Rory dragged him down to Crowley's to show him the axe in the window. Donald remembered, quote, "The guitar was sitting in the window. It had pride of place there. Rory brought me down and he explained to me that it was similar to Buddy Holly's guitar. It was his ambition at the time to have a guitar just like Buddy Holly. I think every guitarist wanted one. To me, the contours and the shape of the instrument, it's a classic shape, similar to something like a spaceship. It wasn't what I had imagined. We were so used to the round shape of a guitar, and electronics were such a new thing. We couldn't understand how the sound could come from it. It was love at first sight. It was destiny." But the 100-pound price tag was far out of reach for then 15-year-old Rory. Donald would remember that it might as well have been £1 million, but somehow young Rory talked the store owner Michael Crowley into installment payments, and then he dragged his mother down to the shop to sign off on the whole thing. Rory would tell her that, quote, he could play rhythm and lead at the same time, unquote, so it was like buying two guitars in one and he could earn more money. Who knows how this cocky little 15-year-old talked his mother into putting her name on a hire purchase, or talked a grizzled old store owner into letting basically a little kid walk away with a prized possession like a real Fender Strat, but clearly Rory was one determined and persuasive young man. With his Stratocaster in hand, Rory then set out to conquer the world. Right before purchasing it, he had joined his first band, a show band called Fontana, but this band would eventually morph into a Rory-fronted version called The Impact in 1965. And in 1966, Rory would break away to form his own blues rock band, The Taste, which would soon be shortened to just Taste in 1966. But shortly after Taste's formation, some of Rory's gear was stolen. His Stratocaster and a borrowed Telecaster were both nicked after a show in Dublin and presumed lost for several weeks, until an Irish television show called Garda Patrol ran a feature on Rory and his lost gear. Since Ireland had only one TV station, everyone watched it. Due to it airing all over Ireland, and the Stratocaster being such a rare bird on the island, apparently the thieves found it impossible to sell, so they decided to shockingly toss the guitars into a wet Irish ditch, where they would spend several weeks before being happened upon. Rory told the story, quote, "I had it stolen one time, following a brief appearance at the Five Club to visit Pat Egan about the Dublin scene, and it got very beaten up then. I had borrowed a Telecaster, and it and the Telly were nicked. I was terrified for a few days in case I would have to buy a Strat and a Telecaster. Both guitars were found, with the assistance of some exposure on Garda Patrol on RTE, behind a front garden wall on the South Circular Road, with some of the strings missing and the bodies knocked about, but thankfully they were okay." A follow-up episode of Garda Patrol was dismissive of Rory, and rock and roll in particular, with a police officer saying that the thieves had probably done Rory's neighbors a favor by stealing the guitars. But whatever the establishment thought, Rory was just happened to have his prized instrument back, and he was said to have refused to let the guitar out of his sight from then on. This was the beginning of a hard life for the Stratocaster. Rory's playing style and non-stop touring schedule caused the sunburst finish to begin wearing away as early as the late 60s, and as the 70s ushered in, the paint quickly fell off most of the guitar, until by 1975 about 80% of the original finish had completely worn away. Only a few areas on the lower bout still bear the orange burst of the finish, along with a black streak on the upper horn. The tales of long nights spent on stage where Rory felt truly at home were etched forever into the face of the guitar, making it one of the most iconic looking axes in rock history. One legend as to why so much of the finish had worn so quickly was that, in addition to the time spent in the ditch, Rory has a rare blood type, and his brother Donal reported that it caused his sweat to be especially acidic, speeding up the process of the guitar's aging. There might be some truth to this, at least in the sweat department, as Rory has said that on several occasions he's had to replace the guitar's neck with a spare temporarily, while the original hung in a warm, dry room for several weeks to dry out. Rory said in the mid-80s, quote, "After a while, the original neck went bad on me. That was about 10 years ago, but I took it off and hung it up. After a few months, it dried out and was fine again." There are a few pictures of Rory playing the Strat with a spare neck that is a veneer fretboard, and he has stated that he had to remove the original neck several times over the years to dry it out. The original 61 neck has undergone almost total renovation with new tuners, several new nuts, an added string tree to the E and B string, and at least one refret. The pickguard was replaced with an exact Fender replacement after the Taste era, when it had deformed and split in several places. Gallagher would have the guitar's pickups modified many times over its history. In conjunction with the neck incident, around the same time, the constant moisture blew the neck and bridge pickups, and Rory most likely replaced them with stock Fender pickups of the era. Later in the 80s, Rory's bridge pickup would undergo further changes, appearing in 1982 with a black cover. Rory called the pickup a Fender Hot X100, but this doesn't exist, and most likely refers to Fender's Lead 2 X1 pickups that were put into the guitars of the same name in the early 80s. Those are making a comeback, by the way, with Fender releasing reissues of the Lead 2 and 3 last year. He even tried a DiMarzio Fat Strat pickup, but some also think that he may have lifted the bridge pickup from his Fender gifted 25th anniversary Strat that they gave to Rory in 1979. Adding to the confusion, luthier Kent Armstrong opened Rory's guitar in the early 2000s and determined that the neck and middle pickups were 70s era stock Fenders and the bridge was a DiMarzio Fat Strat. However, some have pointed out that DiMarzios of the era did not come with yellow wire, and this pickup had yellow wire, so it also could have been the Fender X1 again. Whatever pickup it ended up being, Rory probably had no idea because it had been swapped out so many times over the course of his career. Rory also had the bottom tone control wired out so that he could just have a master volume and master tone. He also replaced the 3-way selector switch to a more modern 5-way. After Rory's untimely death at age 47 in 1995, Rory's brother Donal put the guitar into retirement from use, lending it only to Fender in '97 to create the Rory Gallagher signature model. Later in 2011, Donald would lend the guitar to blues guitarist Joe Bonamassa, who would open both of his 2 shows at the Hammersmith Apollo in London with Rory's song Cradle Rock. The Strat is still displayed from time to time, and one has to wonder what the guitar would be worth should it ever hit the auction market. Considering some truly amazing figures have been nabbed by other guitars recently, including the current king of the auction market, $6.01 million for Kurt Cobain's Martin that he used in the Unplugged show, it is a wonder what Rory's guitar would go for, but I doubt Donald would allow that to happen for a long while. For now, it remains with the family where it belongs. That's another episode of If Guitars Could Speak. Hope you enjoy the show, and remember to like the video and subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel if you want to see more content like this. Also, hit the bell icon to get notified whenever I post new content. You don't want to miss a thing, so I should see you next time, right? Thanks for watching.